Have you heard the big news? Well, CompTIA is changing the Security Plus and everything that you knew about the exam. They're going from version 601 to 701, and there are quite a few changes compared to the previous version that I think you should understand. Now, as far as me, I didn't see this in any emails or notifications or anything like that. I just happened to stumble upon it and find out that they had actually released or announced that 701 was coming. Now, if you're not familiar with the certification game and how things work, typically, whenever a certification vendor releases an exam, they give about 3 years on that exam version or those objectives, and then they do a refresh and they come out with a new version, sometimes completely different than the previous version. Usually it's taking out old things, maybe adding in some newer things that are now relevant. And this is pretty common, right? Typically though, there is some kind of official announcement, a press release, something like that, where everybody starts talking about, oh, how the sky is falling and how everything is going to be different in this exam version versus the last, how it's going to be way harder or it's going to be way easier, and there's all these kinds of different debates and different discussions. So let's go ahead and go over to the Security Plus website and let's talk a little bit more about it. So this is the website for the Security Plus. If you don't know what the Security Plus is, basically it's a foundational cybersecurity certification that a ton of people get when they're starting their journey. If you want to work for the military or the US government, something like that, then it is mandated. Or if you want to work for a government contractor, then typically it's going to be required. But it's just one of those certifications that really kind of kicks off your journey. It's going to give you an introduction to cybersecurity concepts, different tools, things like that you're going to need to know. Obviously, you wouldn't stop there, but it is a good entry point that a lot of people use. So if we start looking at the website here, we can see right away exam code 601 and 701. So the version that's been out for a few years is 601. And 701 was not talked about anywhere, right? There was no official press release that I could find. I didn't see it in any emails or anything like that. But if we keep scrolling down here, we'll see a little bit more about the Security Plus. So again, core foundation of essential skills. Use it for a baseline cybersecurity certification. It does require you to get continuing education credits. So you do have to basically stay up to date with the industry, attend webinars, do trainings, get other certifications, things like that to keep it current. Embrace the latest trends. So you're going to learn about things like zero trust, risk analysis, operational technology, IoT, and many other things, right? Keep scrolling down here. So this is like the major headline, right? Like this is the major announcement spot here. The CompTIA Security Plus SY0701 exam is coming in November 2023. Vouchers for the SY0601 version are still valid through July 31st, 2024. So that is a really important date if you're looking to get Security Plus certified. So I want you to really keep that date in mind. So if we keep scrolling down here, the new CompTIA Security Plus SY0701 represents the latest and greatest in cybersecurity, covering the most in-demand skills related to current threats, automation, zero trust, IoT, risk, and more. You'll be able to assess the security posture of an enterprise environment and recommend and implement appropriate security measures. Again, this is a baseline certification. This is a fundamental certification. It's not going to all of a sudden make you an expert. Monitor and secure hybrid environments, including cloud, mobile, IoT, so Internet of Things, and operational technology. Operate with an awareness of applicable regulations and policies, including principles of governance, risk, and compliance. Identify, analyze, and respond to security events and incidents. So again, like I said with the military or the government, we have something called the DoD 8570 mandate or DoD 8140. And that's basically the mandate that requires a certification like Security Plus to work for a government contractor, military, or the government just in general. So that's kind of where you have to look as far as requirements for those kinds of jobs. And basically, this became a mandate or required in January of 2011. So it's been a mandate or a requirement for many, many years. If we keep scrolling down here, so this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting, right? So this talks about what skills you're going to learn. So general security concepts includes key cybersecurity terminology and concepts up front to provide a foundation for security controls discussed throughout the exam. Threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations focuses on responding to common threats, cyber attacks, vulnerabilities, and security incidents, and appropriate mitigation techniques to monitor and secure hybrid environments. Security architecture includes security implications of different architecture models, principles of securing enterprise infrastructure, and strategies to protect data. Security operations, including applying and enhancing security and vulnerability management techniques, as well as security implications of proper hardware, software, and data management. And then security program management and oversight, updated to better reflect the reporting and communication skills required for Security Plus job roles relating to governance, risk management, compliance, assessment, and security awareness. So keep those things in mind because we'll come back to those, talk about those here in a little bit. But if we keep scrolling down here, different roles that might have the Security Plus. Again, it can apply to a lot of different roles. Tier 2 tech support, IT support manager, business analyst, cybersecurity manager, software developer, system administrator, and a whole bunch of others, right? Keep scrolling down here, more organizations that like the Security Plus or ask for it. Deloitte, Fidelity, Johns Hopkins, Microsoft, Wells Fargo, and Zoom. If we keep scrolling down here, and you'll notice too that CompTIA has had some rebranding on their website, so things have changed a little bit if you haven't been on here in a while. Now we get into the exam details. So let's compare the two just for the exam details here. So SY0601 and then SY0701. So 601 was launched in 2020. So again, about 3 years is typically when an exam will expire or get refreshed. So the launch date of SY0701 is going to be November 7th, 2023. So about 3 years, right? Overall objective is pretty much the same, right? That's not changing. It's still the same kind of certification that they're trying to get you certified with. Maximum of 90 questions. Same amount. So you could get less, you could get up to 90, right? You're not going to get more than 90, but that's important to keep in mind. Multiple choice and performance based, so that's pretty standard. Select either one option or multiple options, maybe a drag and drop, something like that. The performance based isn't anything to get scared about because it's not going to be like go in and configure a Cisco firewall, right? It's just not going to happen. Length of test, 90 minutes, that's the same. Passing score, 750. So we'll come back to this here in a little bit because there is something interesting that I found as far as that goes. But keep that in mind. Experience recommendations, same, 2 years, Network Plus, pretty standard, right? That's been what it is for a long time. The languages that it's going to be offered in, and then retirement. So retirement is always important, right? Again, typically, since these get refreshed every 3 years, typically you get about 6 months from that launch date to then go for that previous version. Otherwise, you have to go for the new version. So this is saying July 2024. And if you remember back to when we talked about the vouchers for the exam version 601, that's when they're going to expire, right? So you have to keep that date in mind if you're preparing for the certification exam or if you will in the future, especially, as we get closer to that date, then you're going to really have to understand that date and where you're at if it makes more sense to go for that new version or the previous version, right? So the 601 or the 701, because you don't want to waste a whole bunch of time studying for a certain exam version, and then all of a sudden you don't make that date, and now you have to catch up and either find out what you need to learn in addition to that, or you have to completely go back and start from scratch and start learning the stuff over again with those new exam objectives. So really important date. You can take it online, you can take it in person, and $392 US. Okay, so under the Get Practice Questions and Exam Objectives, this is really important. This is something you're going to want to do. You go in here and you fill this out, put your name, your email, and then you can select all these other ones. This will give you the option where you can download practice questions, and usually it's about 10 or 20 practice questions, somewhere around there. And then you can also get the exam objectives. So you can see specifically what they are requiring you to understand for each exam version. And you can compare the two because they have both the 601 on there and the 701 on there where you can download them. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CyberTrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. So I went ahead and I downloaded both versions of the exam objectives so that we can see them side by side and talk about them. So on the left here, we have the 601, and then on the right, we have 701, and we're going to go to the exam details. So again, the amount of questions is the same amount of time, same type of questions, multiple choice and performance based, same recommended experience. But you'll see on the 601, we do have a score that's listed, so a 750. On the 701, we do not see a score listed. So that's pretty interesting, even though on the website, how it lined it up in the table, it did show the score the same for both. Now, typically, the CAS Plus, which is the highest level certification for cybersecurity that CompTIA has, that doesn't have a necessarily passing score. It's a pass-fail exam, so you're not really going to know what score that you got. That hasn't been the case with the Security Plus. I do wonder if they're going to go towards that model and try to revamp or kind of restructure the passing capability or what you need to get to pass. But that is an important distinction, I think, especially as we get closer to the exam release, and then as it's released and we kind of get into it, how that plays out. Maybe that was just a typo, right, that they just left out. We don't know yet. But let's look at the domains here. So right away, you can see that the domains are labeled different things. So on the 601 version, we have attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities, architecture and design, implementation, operations and incident response, governance, risk, and compliance. On the 701 version, we have general security concepts, threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations, security architecture, security operations, and security program management and oversight. So one big change that I want to show you is under the operations section here. So in the 601 version, it was 16%. In the new version, the 701 version, security operations is 28%. That's a huge jump in comparison to that old version. The other one that I want to show you is domain 5 of the previous version was 14%, so GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. In the new version, security program management and oversight, it's 20%. So not nearly as big of a jump, but still a huge jump in comparison to the other domains. So let's go ahead and scroll down here and look at the actual domains. So again, domain 1 on the new version is going to be general security concepts. This is going to be a lot of the general concepts that you're aware of. So things like CIA triad or non-repudiation, kind of these general security terms, right? Just like the title of the domain. And I think that is a better place to start than jumping right into threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities, because this gives you a baseline understanding of some of these core concepts that we absolutely have to know. That is a really important part of working in cybersecurity. So that's definitely one big change as far as the domains, not necessarily the overall content, right? Because that goes back down to the exam weight breakdown. But it is interesting to see that differentiation and how things have changed with that. If we go to domain 2, you can see that in the old version, it was architecture and design. In the new version, we have threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. So you can see from that old version, it went from 1.0 to 2.0 as far as the domain. Now, it's still a ton of the same content, the same terms, things like that, but I wonder if CompTIA is showing that's kind of the order of importance that you should understand, right? It's always interesting when there is a restructuring like that that really changes things quite a bit as far as how things are laid out. If we go down to the next version, so 3.0, this is security architecture. So this is going to be 2.0 on the 601 version of the exam. Again, it's a lot of the same things, and you'll find this with this new exam version is that it's not necessarily a ton of different information, but sometimes there are different terms or categories of terms that are consolidated into one of these other domains now instead of being spaced out and put across multiple domains. So that's a good change, I think. We also see that in domain 4.0, which is security operations. So if we scroll down here to 4.0 on the old version, this was operations and incident response. Again, those are very similar kind of titling, so we should expect that it's going to be pretty much the same kind of information. And if you look through these different terms that are listed in here, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find very similar kinds of information and terms that you're going to have to be aware of. The thing with that too is that in the industry, it's really called security operations, right? It's not called operations and incident response. Operations or security operations encompasses all of that stuff. So digital forensics, incident response, network monitoring, all of that stuff is within security operations. So I think that's better aligned with how the industry is. Now, if we scroll down to 5.0 in the domains, we see a little bit of difference as far as which topics or terms are listed. Now, in the older version, I think this really focused a lot on just the frameworks and getting you kind of exposed to those frameworks, the names, what they were, things like that. And then it was a bunch of policies, right? That was a major focus of the old or the 601 version's 5.0 domain. In the new one, it's switching more to program management and oversight. So things like risk management still has the policies and the things that you need, right? It's not going to just get rid of those because they're still really, really important. But we start seeing, again, things like risk management. This has a huge domain in here, and that's really important to keep in mind because especially in this kind of role, security program management oversight role, you do need to know quite a bit about risk management and how that applies to your organization. Now, when I went through and I actually compared the terms that are listed in both versions, the 601 and the 701, there's not a ton of difference, right? They took out more terms than they added. And that's an important distinction because sometimes you'll see vendors that are just adding a whole bunch of information and they're really making that exam a lot bigger. This one, in my eyes and how I perceive it, and even just the results of comparing the two, they took a step back and took out some of that legacy information that's honestly been in there for a while. And I think that's really important for them to do because, eventually you don't need to learn a lot of that legacy stuff. Some of that legacy stuff is no longer relevant to you if you're just getting in the industry. When I started, some of that was relevant, right? We did need to know some of that. We couldn't just avoid that because some of that stuff was still around. But now, a lot of that stuff is legacy, it's dated, it's no longer being implemented. So let's just take it out. People don't need to necessarily know that, right? Now, the other thing that I want to talk about that everybody always asks, and I'm sure you're already thinking it right now, should you take the 601 version or should you take the 701 version, right? How should you go about that? So typically, what I say when I'm looking at different exam versions is that the current version, so 601 in this case, that has the most study resources available. It's going to be like that for a while. Typically, when a new exam version comes out, there is this lag period where it takes a while for different resources, different courses, different books, things like that to come out. And so if you're going for the new version, it could be a little bit of a challenge, especially on the differences, right? The new terms that you have to learn, because again, I don't think it's going to hurt you if you learn the old terms, right? You're just going to have a little bit more knowledge, but you do have to make up for those new terms that are added. You've got to learn them, right? You can't just ignore them because they're going to count against your score if you don't get the answers correctly. So that's an important difference for sure. So typically I'll say, go for the latest exam version or the previous exam version, right? Until you can't anymore, up until that point. Now, obviously, as you get closer to that drop dead date of when the 601 version is going to expire, then you have to start thinking about it because, for instance, if it's going to take you 3 months to study and you only have 1 month until that exam version expires, that might not be the best use of your time. you might want to go ahead and go for that newer version and just start from scratch learning that newer version. But at least as the recording of this video, you have plenty of time to go for the 601 version. So I would not, even if we get to November, I would not actually go for the 701 up until maybe towards the end, maybe like a month or two away, and then maybe consider it. And players don't typically look at the exam version. They just look to see if you have a valid certification. And that's a really important thing to understand too, because I get that question quite a bit. You'd be surprised, right? People are like, well, what if I get the 701? That's the newest version, so I'm going to look way better, right? Not really, because nobody really cares that you got the 701 or the 601. They just care that you're certified if they care about the certification at all. So that's a really important thing to understand, I think, and something that people don't always, think about, right? They think it's going to say their exam version, which sometimes on the certificate it does. But again, nobody really cares about that. Now, as far as training, I have made a 601 course. I have a ton of practice exam questions. All of that is on Cyber Training Pro. I really recommend that you go use that for preparing for the certification. We have other stuff too, Network Plus and other certifications, other training, career services, things like that. But since we're talking about the Security Plus, I really recommend using that for the 601. I will also have a 701 course. So as we get a little bit closer, that will start to come out and then you'll be able to use that as well. But make sure that you use Cyber Training Pro. I'm telling you, I have so many practice exam questions that will help you pass your certification exam. The course is really good. And I got news for you. We cover all the information that you need. So that will help you for the 601. Once we release the 701, then make sure to grab that course if you're going to go for the 701, and then you'll be prepared for that as well. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you found this information informative, comparing the 601 version of the Security Plus against the 701 version of the Security Plus and talking about all the differences that exist. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them below. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That way YouTube knows you enjoy the content. And check out Cyber Training Pro. Again, that course is awesome. I spent a ton of time on it, and there's a ton of practice questions that are really, really helpful for you to pass your exam. Until next time, I'll see you later.